Thank you for joining me. I am Bill Mooney with WSU Public Media, located in Columbus, Ohio. And I want to talk about creating confident and engaged readers using Google Forms. One of the real joys of being a teacher is the opportunity to read with students. And that might be a read aloud, that could be guided reading or more independent reading. One of the challenges we face is how can we, engage students in that reading? How can we make connections between some things that sometimes the settings or the characters are unfamiliar, and how can we connect what is familiar to their lives to what's unfamiliar in this? Sometimes the concepts are hard. So how can we make those concepts accessible? And so really, I'm talking about kind of creating activities that activate and build background knowledge. So, I'm going to talk about really I'm going to provide 7 examples of activities that could be, you can put in Google Forms that would activate that knowledge and start to build that background, and again, scaffold those ideas so that when you are in the classroom and you are reading, students feel, again, comfortable with the subject. The interaction between you and the students can be rich. The students can learn from each other. So we got to first make those connections. So in these 7 examples that I'll be using Google Forms, I'll provide a book, and I'll show you an example. I won't really go through a lot of the basics of Google Forms. A lot of us are familiar with some of the basics, but maybe sometimes we're using Google Forms one way. This might be another way to look at it. And a lot of the activities I'll share here are kind of meant to be maybe warm-up activities before reading. But the activities could also be used during reading, or even some of them could be used post-reading. But a lot of the examples I'll give is kind of warming up for a book, or you've just started a book and you want to kind of give those students background knowledge of it. So again, I'll be talking a lot about books here. One of my favorite things is books. And so I'll reference a number of books. Hopefully some of them, I'll recommend some many titles you haven't heard before, and maybe you'll be interested in pursuing them. So let's get started. So let me start with, Google Forms before we start. So Google Forms, free, easy to use. A lot of us use Google Forms for quizzes, surveys, exit tickets. So, and we're used to putting in questions, how do you feel about this? Or, what's the capital? So we're using that. I'm going to use a lot of images and videos. My examples for kind of getting students engaged and building their background knowledge are a lot of examples of using images and videos. So that'll be a big part of it. So let's get started. So one of the great ways to get students build their background knowledge, get them excited about reading, make connections is show them a picture. So we might be getting ready to read, and let's show them a picture and let's talk about that picture so that we can, again, start that conversation about what's going to happen. So pictures, a lot of us are very comfortable with pictures, and so that can be a great way. So putting a picture inside a Google form can be a great way. So I'm going to give you an example. So I'm going to show you, again, I'll talk about a book, and then I'll show you an example of a Google form. So the book is When Stars Are Scattered, one of my favorite graphic novel about 2 brothers growing up in a Kenyan refugee camp and their struggle to survive. So if I'm getting my students ready for that book, it's a wonderful book that everybody jumps into and is immediately hooked, but it might be good to kind of set a background for that. So what I did was I went to the web, and there was lots of information about this refugee camp in Kenya. There was lots of news stories and lots of images. So I just pulled some images, and so let me show you an example. So in this example, I've got when stars are scattered. So I grabbed an image of the structures that they have in this refugee camp. And so I have a picture here. So I created a form instead of starting with a question like name or multiple choice, I inserted a picture. So just kind of go in on that, on this end, kind of at the end where you edit. Here in this side, you're immediately started with a question. Well, the first question I just deleted, and I went to add an image. And I had already preloaded about 5 or 6 images from that refugee camp, and I put them on my computer. So I browsed, located that, put that in there. And I didn't title this image because I kind of wanted the students in this exercise. Now, again, a lot of these Google Forms, you could use it different ways. In this example, this could be something that I send to the students. And so I put it in our learning management system, whether Google Classroom or whatever system you use, and they could open this up and look at this picture and answer some questions. But this also could be something we more discuss. So we pull it up on the projector or on our whiteboard, whatever we have in the classroom, or if we're using Zoom, I could share this screen. So whatever, I could actually, it could be more discussion, or it could actually be asking questions. Either one would work. So I'd have this picture, and then I did add 2 questions about this image. What can you tell me about this picture? And then what more can you find out about this picture? So again, either one, whether it's going to be synchronous, we're going to be talking about it, we're going to be discussing it, or I'm going to let them kind of tell me more about it, and then we'll talk about it. So in this picture, obviously I'm looking for them to pull out a lot of information here about, the materials used to build this house, the materials that surround this house. I'm looking for kids to try to pry them to look at, is there grass here? What bushes do you see? Look at the sky. Using all those clues to start to tell us about this environment and start to make connections with what's happening here. Because, this structure is in the book, When Stars Are Scattered, this structure is pictured quite a bit in the story. So this is really going to help them get ready for that. That's one example. Here's just another quick example. So similarly, this is a picture from some boys going to school in that refugee camp, and they're about the age of the kids in the story. So, I could pull this picture out and just say, again, what can you tell me about this picture? What questions do you have about this picture? Again, we want to pull out all kinds of things. We want to talk about, their uniforms for school. We want to talk about the landscape that we see behind them, the sky we see behind them, because that'll all help us put us in that place for that book. So images can be a great way to kind of get students started on talking about a book. In example 2 of how to engage students or develop that background knowledge, or excite them about this, is how about putting a video in a Google form? So videos can be a great thing to insert into Google Forms. What's nice about inserting a video in Google Forms is it's easy. As we'll show in a second here, it's right there in the sidebar, and it goes searches YouTube, and now you can search all the content that's in YouTube. I always recommend, if I'm putting a video inside a Google form, that it's a short video. In this example I'm going to show, there was lots of good videos, and I felt I found the one that would hold attention. It's about 2 to 3 minutes long. So same book, When Stars Are Scattered, referencing the boys in the refugee camp. So let me share this example. So here it is. I just, again, on this right-hand side where you insert elements, instead of inserting an image, you can search and add a video. Now, obviously, I did some pre-searching in YouTube. There was a number of videos that referenced this refugee camp in Kenya where this book is set. But I found one that, again, would be good to use either right before we read or as we're starting to read. And this video is a short video. And so I just pulled its URL, I brought it in, and here it is. Now, what I love about this video is it's a short video, but it's also a 360 video. So whoever took this video had a 360 camera. So the students, when I share it to them, can really spin themselves around and get a feeling for, again, more of the environment of this refugee camp and more of the people. So it shows a lot more of the structures. I think it has a image of a school there too. And I just ask one question with this video. So I inserted this. And so I don't put a lot of, you could put a couple of videos, but I just put one video and then one question. And I said, write down a response or questions you have after watching this video. And it'd be hard not to have questions. When you get a 360 video, it really kind of gives you a sense of place, and everybody will probably have a different question. So stick a video in, ask a question. We could go through lots of examples of this. Now, example 3, so we've talked about put an image in, put a video in, ask a few questions. Again, start that engagement. My favorite is use a map. So get students used to the place and the setting slowly, and maps can be a good way to kind of place people. I know when I get a new book and I look at the, who's the characters or where's this set. I recently bought a book about the desert in New Mexico, and a character lives there, and so I immediately went to Google Earth and maps, and I looked at New Mexico in this area, and so it really kind of put me in the place of what's that environment like. And so I like to do that with students too, and I think that's a great way to kind of get students involved. So idea number 3 is use a map. So in this example, and you can see the map of Syria here. And the book I'm talking about in this example is the wonderful book, Other Words for Home, about a young girl who was born in Syria. And because of political unrest, she and her mother need to move with relatives to Cincinnati, Ohio. So from Syria to Cincinnati, Ohio, and the book deals with, obviously that hard change of new places to call home. And so I would want to start the students, for starting this, I want students to understand where Syria is, what's that, what's the climate like, how are people dressed, how is that like? And then we compare that to Cincinnati, Ohio, and what a change that can be. Just you can see that in pictures, you can see that in maps. So I would show maps. So let me quickly, I'll show you an example of a Google form. So in this Google form, what I did was I did put the book cover. So I found the image for the book cover, and I put that in as the first. There's nothing to respond to in that example. But then I have a couple. I start with a map, a big world map of where Syria is in the Middle East, to kind of locate it. And then we get closer, because the character does in the first couple chapters does talk about specific cities in Syria. And she references living on the beach and living on a coastal town in Syria. So what I've done is I've given maps. Again, it gives me place. And then I also put in pictures with those places. So maps and pictures. And then a few questions to start, say, what do you know about this location? What do you know about Cincinnati, Ohio? Again, trying to draw out that the two have a lot of differences in terms of climate. And, one is by the ocean, one's on the river, one is kind of arid, and one can be, has lots of rain and hills and trees. And so we want to kind of share that experience and bring that out. Now, this could be an exercise we could do before, to kind of get the setting, or it might be something we might want to do in the first, after the first few pages, because it quickly references Syria. So again, we could use that either one, but maps can be a great way to kind of start people in. Idea number 4 is engaging students with respond to a passage. Again, I could use this before reading, but also I could use this during our reading. So if I pull a passage out, we look at the text, the vocabulary. Also, we could, as we'll talk about later, it could be an image. But this one, we're responding to a passage. And so this example, I am going to use, again, other words for home. And why I like this book is because it's written in a very lyrical way in terms of each chapter almost is like a poem. So it's really easy to look at a passage and kind of let's talk about this passage. And one of the things I should preference is, it's hard to get, you can't, if you want to do passages from a book, you can't go search in Google Images for passages. You could find some, but a lot of times that's going to be hard to do because people don't have pictures of the inside of these books for obvious reasons. So how do I do that? So this image kind of shows you is in that book, Other Words for Home, I would open the book up. I would take a picture with my phone of the passage that I'm looking for. Then I have the Google Photos app on my phone. And so I create I took, let's say 10 pictures of passages from this. I put those in a photo album inside Google Photos, and then I share that album to my work account. And now when I'm building my Google form, it's all right there. So that's how I get the passages. It's not the best way. The pictures sometimes aren't a little screwed and a little, off kilter, things like that, but it works. It works. So that's how I kind of put passages in. So let me show an example here. So in this Google form, so again, it's the same book here, Other Words for Home. I put the cover on the front, but I'm not asking questions. And then here's the passage. And it's the main character's thoughts, first impressions of America. And so the students could read this. And I'm asking, what is your reaction to this passage? Now I can add other passages. So, I could go and add an image, browse, and it'll pull up my images, and I could locate the other passage. I've got quite a few in here, and there's one. And I just say open, and there it brought in another passage. So, I could put a number of passages in, but a lot of times, again, I like to kind of stick with one image and a question, maybe a couple, but kind of keep it short and simple. Because again, are we looking at this? Are we sharing this example, and you're going to answer on your own, or is this a discussion we're doing on Zoom or on the board? So either one. So start with a passage. So our fifth idea is using predictions. So asking students to, whether that's look at images, which I enjoy doing, could be a video, could be text, and say, what is happening here? What do you see happening here? And what do you think, how's this going to play into our story? So asking students for their predictions of what's going to happen. In this example, I'm going to use another one of my favorite books, Tar Beach, which is about a young girl who grows up in New York City. And one of her favorite things to do with her family in the summertime is go on the rooftop of their apartment building and enjoy a picnic with her family and their friends. And so in this example of using a Google form and asking students kind of make predictions of what might happen, let me share the Google form. So here I've got, so it's again, the book's Tar Beach. And I started this with a question. What do you think this book, after what is going to be about after looking at these images? And so Faith Ringgold, who wrote this book, is an artist. And so I went on to Google Arts and Culture and I pulled some of her paintings and other artworks and I put those images in. So I saved the images off of Google Arts and Culture, put them on my computer, and then I put them into Google Forms by adding images. And so, there's a couple pictures here and students would need to study those. And again, I could use this at the beginning, but I'm really thinking of as asking them to say, okay, we're about to read this book. We might have shown the title on the front page, but now I'm asking you to look at this artwork that deals with this story. What do you think is going to happen in this book? And this book is so imaginative, and so students are going to have to kind of think about, wow, I'm seeing all kinds of interesting things here, and so I'm sure there's going to be lots of different predictions of what's going to happen because in the book, the young girl does dream of flying. So that's going to have to, something we're going to have to talk about. Wait, someone's going to fly? What's that going to be about? So there's going to be some interesting predictions of what's going to happen in this book. So that can be another way to kind of start to engage students, because if you just read this book without kind of engaging that concept of her dreaming about flying, it kind of gets, wait, why is she flying? So again, predictions can be helpful. So idea number 6 for engaging readers using Google Forms is take students on a picture walk, gallery walk, picture walk. Love this idea. A colleague of mine at WSU Classroom really showed me this idea, and I thought, I love that idea. There's so many wonderful picture books, and if I can put those images in form and we can kind of look at a number of images and then kind of talk about what's going to happen in this book from looking at these pictures. So in this example, I'm going to use the book Dreamers, which is a wonderful book about, and it's just filled with this wonderful artwork. It's really such a big part of the story about a woman and her baby who immigrate to the United States from Mexico and some of that challenges. But really a lot of the story is this wonderful artwork that has all this meaning to it and symbolism. And so it's almost over when you first go through the book, it can be kind of overwhelming, all the images. So it's almost like you need some time to look at the images and talk about them before you even really start to get into the book. So taking students on a picture walk. So let's look at this example in Google Forms. So here's the form. And so I'm calling it Dreamers Picture Walk. And so what I've done here is I really didn't ask questions. I'm really just putting pictures from the book. Now, because this book is such a beautiful book, there are a lot of images on Google of the pages. But if there's another book that doesn't have all these images, then you might have to go to kind of taking pictures and putting them in a Google form. But what I've done here is I think I did 4 pictures or 5 pictures. And again, I could ask questions about each one of these pictures and get students to kind of bring out. So I could put in questions. So I could put those in. But I think a lot of times I'd want to kind of just maybe even display this and us to just kind of scroll through these pictures one by one and kind of ask students, what do you see here? What do you know about colors? If you kind of looked at the book before, you'll know there's butterflies on pages and there's birds on pages, and we start to notice those. We can start to talk about, why are there butterflies on each page? Well, do we see birds on each page and where, and what might that mean? So taking students on a picture walk. Sometimes we think of that as something we would do with a younger audience with our picture books, which is great. But really we want to think about also bringing that up to our older students, and what images are in their books, whether it's a cover, um, maybe inside there might be a few images. So we want to, this can work for a picture or gallery walk, can work for all levels of students. So our final idea of, again, building background knowledge and using Google Forms to help build that background knowledge. How about using it to, we talked about in the beginning of this, is making connections to maybe concepts that are hard to understand, to more your personal life. So making those personal connections, asking students, have you experienced something similar to this? Or have you ever had this situation happen to you? Maybe not the exact situation, or have you ever felt lost? Or, so we're asking the students to make that personal connection. So in this example, I'm going to use the book Ephraim Divided, which is about a young boy whose mother gets deported, and he has to become the main caregiver of his younger siblings, and what a kind of challenge that is for him. So let me share the form. So in this form, I did, put the book title towards the top. But what I did was I put in this example, I created a question and I put the book in here, the front cover of the book. And I said, the question is, have you ever faced a difficult challenge? Explain. Obviously, in this case, in this book, his difficult challenge is having to take care of his siblings, feed them, get them ready for school. So a big challenge, but everybody's faced a challenge. And so, we're getting kind of making that connection as, again, and this could work before reading this book, saying, oh, we're getting ready to read this book where there's going to be a challenge, or could even be something that we ask during the book or even after the book to say, have you faced this challenge before? So again, we could use this, and students could put their own answer. It could be a discussion that we do. And another example of kind of making it personal, having kids make a personal connection. Here is a Google form created around the book Piecing Me Together. In this book, wonderful book by Renee Watson, the main character, the young lady, has to deal with feeling like she is one person at home and she's someone else at school, very different people, almost two different characters, shall we say. And so, I'm going to ask students, and, do you ever find that you feel like you're two different people with your friends or at home? Everybody's had some of that experience. You find it hard to express yourself when you're, at home or at school as those two different people, because again, that starts to make that connection to that young girl in this novel. Well, thank you for joining me in creating confident and engaged readers using Google Forms. Hope this presentation brought you to think about how to engage students in reading and create that conversation, but also how you might use Google Forms in creating those confident and engaged readers. Thank you.